Good morning. Denise Dryden live. I usually do these weekly videos, and the topic for today is getting to neutral. And I scheduled it for 9 o'clock, and you know, everything that could possibly go wrong. Phone call coming in, the tripod falls over, and I was like, this is a great example of how to get to neutral and to really take my time before I got on, so that it didn't look like I was going, wah, wah, you know, like, what are we going to do here, right? So we're in December. We're bringing 2020 to a close. We've been in a lockdown. We have some, you know, if you're a small business owner, if you have been reduced in your workload, we have economic impacts. We have the pressures of family traditions, and we've got this national and global crisis going on, right? So, you know, like, it's not easy to be neutral right now, and it makes sense. So what I wanted to do was navigate through this today by explaining that I'm a coach, and for some reason, I can say it, I have no idea how I found it, but I started working with parents and working with the parent dynamic. Here's mom, here's dad, here's mom and mom, here's dad and dad. It doesn't matter, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kinds of parents, all in co-family situations, who are dealing with a teen in crisis. And so when a teen goes in crisis, it means that things that have been bubbling to the surface for a while, bubbling, finally erupted, or there was such a dramatic change in behavior that none of it makes sense. So when crisis comes up, it could be school refusal, it could be school failure, it could be debilitating anxiety, depression, things that don't, you know, like we're just watching him or her tank. Substance abuse. It could also be screen addiction. It could be bullying. It could be sexual assault. It could be family secrets coming to the surface. Last week I did a lot about, you know, what happens when you kind of get that, oh no, and something happens and you have to deal with it. So when that happens, I'm the coach they bring in because what we do is we have to deal with the crisis, but we also have to deal with the reactions on either of the parent side while they're navigating through this. So for those of you who've been on Zoom now for the last year, I've been doing these calls on Zoom. So imagine having a screen and having one over here and one over here, and depending on how they do, you're kind of like, okay, now I want to talk to you first, you know, and managing two parents in crisis is an interesting challenge. So, you know, whether they're married, right, or partnered, and they're united, or whether they are married and partnered and they're not united, or divorced, separated, living separately, and they're united, or again, if they're divorced, living separately, and they're not united on the same page. You know, it makes the work so difficult depending on where the parents are with each other, right? So both parents are on the line. You know, they have to delve into that really big work. When they go into that big work, this is not easy, because what they have to do is they have to address their treasured child. You know, this beautiful human being is now suffering, and there's something going on. There are various states of trauma going on. Trauma from the child, trauma from the parents, trauma from the outbursts at home. The police might have been called. You know, there might be broken furniture, smashed phones, you know, behavior that just keeps escalating. And, you know, what they need is they need help around understanding what happened. They need help around understanding the testing that's been given to them, so that they can get a handle on maybe learning challenges that were undetected, or the depth of executive functioning, or anxiety, or depression, or suicide ideation. All of that is going to come out in the testing, and we have to sort of hold that and say, so now that we know this, what are we going to do? They need to understand the issues so that they can change their behavior, right? So that the parent can change their behavior. That's the most interesting part, is that getting the parent to change their behavior is my job. So the first part of the work is to explore whether they work together or whether they don't. And what I know is that it's easier when they're together. It's easier when they're united. It's easier when they have the ability to manage themselves and focus and deal with the issue at hand. Because if their focus is united, they listen to each other, right? they validate each other. Like, yeah, I didn't see that. That's a good point. And we need to make sure we introduce that into the mix of solutions as well. Because we all have different eyes and ears, right, on what we see. And they have ways of talking about the challenges. They have ways of addressing the challenges when they come up, and then going like, what are we going to do about this? This is really hard work for someone who's united in a partnership focusing on a problem. What's more difficult is when they're disparate, when they're on opposite ends of the spectrum, opposite ends of the tension rod, and they're pushing it all the way at the end because it's difficult, and they're way out there. They're in fear, they're in anger, they're in blame, they're in shame, they're embarrassed. They have behavior that they're like, oh my gosh, they have accusations about the other person's behavior. There's a lack of cooperation. There's an imbalance of power. Maybe one, always comes over and says that, I'm the one who's here all the time. I'm the one who gets to decide, or I'm the one who's paying the bills, right? There's a imbalance of power, and there's dysregulation. Does any of this sound familiar? And so what I noticed is that, here on this this isn't thought, this is Osho. I love this card. This is what happens when we project. We think we're talking to this person, but this person's talking to this person or this person. This person's talking to this one or this one. And it gets all jumbled up, and it gets really messy, okay? So having a visual is really helpful to me. So what coaching has taught me is that when issues come up and the relationships, become examples of the problems. In other words, whatever existed, before is just going to erupt and get bigger, and we act it out in our relationships. So our relationships, our intimate familial relationships, are where we're going to act out first. It's where we're going to become divided. It's where we're going to become tense. That, as a coach, I can't take sides. I cannot get involved with, I think this is better than this one. It doesn't work. And I'm aware that I'm aware of how we are affected, what it is that's really going on. How do I feel? What am I doing? Why? And if I'm unable to hear, and if my client is unable to hear, that they simply shut down from any input. So when they're in that affected part and they don't know their feelings, or they don't know what to do, and they're in panic, they can't hear, they can't give you input, and they swirl around in survival mode. And the emotions are visible on the outside to everyone. So whether you think you're containing it or not, the bottom line is that when we are affected, it shows. We are a mess outside and in. The other thing I learned is oftentimes the symptoms of the system, whether it's the children, the house, the parental relationship, the extended relationships, and the way the in-laws and the exes and all that stuff interact, is related to this mess. That the whole system, it's like a spider web. One little thing starts wobbling, and then the whole system starts going off. Let's see what else. When you bring the energy down, when you bring the energy in and you stabilize each other, everything changes. You can hear, you can learn, you can listen, you can accept, and you can begin to create changes. If you can't do that, then we're just managing survival road. We're managing. And it's sort of like holding a high power electrical wire. Like, what am I going to do with this? What am I going to do with this? I don't know how to get it calm. And so we have to be able to just bring it down, right? We have to bring it down because nothing's working. And we have to establish ways to address what happens when it goes big and when it goes small. When it goes big and goes small, because you got to count on that. You got to count on the fact that just because you got to quiet once doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. It means that every single time something comes in, you're going to go, wah, and then you're going to come back down. And you're going to go, wah, and you're going to come back down. Because you got to count on the fact that you got to figure out how to do this on a regular basis and, do that regulation, right? So I had some fun, and I defined neutral, and came up with some interesting things. It's a position of disengagement. It's when you're unbiased. It's not engaged in either side, sort of being the observer, not aligned with any political or ideology or any kind of controversy. It's kind of like, well, that's going on out there. You know, that friend was using with my son. That girl was, you know, sending nude pictures with her boyfriend. Yeah, you know, I'm getting all this stuff, right? So you just sort of, you don't align. And also neutral is when the tongue is at rest. Just like put your mouth and bring your tongue down into your teeth. It's when your tongue is at rest. It's not taking part or giving assistance to a dispute or a war or a conflict. Not choosing and feeding one side and going, I hope you win, I hope you win, I hope you win. It has no particular kind of characteristics. So like, you know, those of us who've been looking at homes and rentals and everything, you know, what we see all the time is neutral, beige, off-white. You know, it's like after a while, it's like it'll hold any color. It's like it's so boring, but it's steady. It's dependable. It's an investment. Let's see. Ground that doesn't belong to any side. You know, neutral. It's like, you know, when you play capture the flag, there's a neutral area. You know, when you play a football game in a state championship, you pick a neutral spot that's out of the territory of one or the other, Super Bowl, etc., right? That neither position has a benefit in it, and they can't harm one another. They're neutral. And in chemistry, neutral solution is that it has neither acidic or basic. And my favorite is that is without electrical charge. Without electrical charge. So it kind of goes to that wire thing, right? Which is, what are we going to do with that? So our ability to understand ourselves and our energy in the way that we impact each other is so crucial right now, because we're not neutral. We're not neutral in our relationships. We're not neutral with the political situation. We're not neutral with the world. We're not neutral with COVID. We're not neutral on anything. Because we're triggered, because we have all these things going on. And so when we are triggered, it looks like this. You know, you have all this stuff going on the outside, and you've got all these hot buttons all over you. And it's like, I'm just ready for something. And all you have to do is go up and go, boom, wow, you know, I've got another fight in me, right? And so what we're really talking about is being able to hold yourself in neutrality. And here's the city, here's the bumping, here's the vibration going all over. And just trust that you're going to figure out this at one step at a time. But you have to get to neutral first, right? So tips on how we get to neutral, how we open up and we can hear and we can learn and we can get curious and we give ourselves a place to rest so things can come in. First and foremost, is that the place to start is to do an energy check-in. You know, is your heart racing? Are you breathing from like the neck up? You know, because you're in survival mode. How fast is the information coming in and jumping in all over your head? All over your head and zing, 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 zing. How much do you need to go do something? You want to send emails. You want to make a call. You want to remind your kids, your spouse, you know, like these are the things we have to do. These are the things that, watch your energy. How fast is it going? Really? Okay. Number 2, damn. You got to get that system under control first. You got to bring your system in, and you've got to get yourself to some stable breathing, to some stable holding first. Okay, now I have probably 20 videos. You can go back on this site, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook page, and you can find, and my website, and you can find all of these videos on how to stabilize. For those of you who've been watching me for a while, it's literally all I ever talk about, right? Number 3. If it's deeply buried, you have to give it some attention. You have to let it come up. And if it's external, you have to soften it and you have to quiet it down. You have to bring it up or you have to bring it down. And that regulation, it's like too much, too little. We have to know how much is buried inside when we're totally contracted or overwhelmed, and give it some space. Or if we're in full reaction, give it some space, right? Number 4. Pay attention to your listening. Are you listening? Are you listening to say the next word? Are you listening to react? Are you holding on to, I can't believe that she said that. I can't believe he said that. You know, are you listening to find fault What does your mind do? Is it jumping around going, oh, I don't like that point. I don't like that point. They're wrong. And are you listening to hear? It's really important. Can you quiet that monkey mind? Because if you can't quiet that monkey mind, if it's going like this 100 miles an hour, it's just impossible to hear. Okay? Number 5, open up all of your senses. We've talked about this. Your listening skills. What do I see? What do I feel in my body? What am I noticing? You know, what do I smell? You know, these are the kinds of things that when they start to come in, you're like, oh, I'm starting to get a picture that this is much different because I can see a bigger amount of information, right? And all this information that you get gives you an idea of how you're supposed to navigate through. Number 6, explore when to engage with your support in insights and information. Find ways to capture these. Find ways to trust that what you have and what you see and what you know is appropriate and it's going to work, right? Find the time. And number 7 is to manage yourself first, right? Because when you breathe, when you know your energy, when you know your mind, when you know your reactivity, and when you know your words, then you can launch out, then you can hear. So the way that you manage yourself first, you can't manage somebody else. You can't manage your kid. You can't manage your spouse. You can't manage the teacher. You can't manage anybody until you manage yourself first. So that probably should have gone right at the very beginning, not down here at 6 or 7, right? And 8, be compassionate with those who are on a different timeline. Sometimes they can regulate, sometimes they can't. All you can do is model your own stability and listen and let that other person go in and out and up and down, and you model. And then you just keep listening and you become the solid voice. I think I understand what's going on here. This is what I need to do now. So you don't engage, you go to neutral, you get to neutral, you get to neutral, you get to neutral. Kind of like, you know, if you ever tried to learn how to run a stick shift, or you're working with hot electricity, systems in place. You know the gears, the car's running, or the electricity, the wires have been run, and they're ready. All you have to do is turn on the switch and engage it, and it's ready to go. It's you who does the engaging. It's you first, so you have to manage it. You have to know how much power is coming. You need to know what you're going to do with that. So these are the kind of things I do every week. I hope this is helpful. Please subscribe if you're on YouTube so that we can see more of these. And you can always find me on DeniseDrydenCoaching.com. Have a great Sunday, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.